Hi guys, I'm Mike.
And I'm Ash.
And this is F1 Fanatics. Welcome back to the second episode of F1 Worldwide, the fan podcast, where we talk to fans around the world about topics that either are special interest to them, in the case of today and today's guest, or, just general things that might be happening in the F1 world at that time. So our guest today is, living in Scotland, but I believe you're from the north originally, Kaitey. At least north from us, where we are. So yes, Kaitey, who obviously you'd know if you watch our videos, comments regularly in the comments. So Kaitey, welcome to the show and thank you for coming on.
Thanks, guys. It's really nice to be here.
It's really nice to have you on, and I think our first chat in person-ish. It's hearing a voice where we're usually just communicating online through comments and stuff. So it's cool to have you on. So with Kaitey, if you don't know, Kaitey is quite a big Kevin Magnussen, so therefore Haas fan. So today our topic is going to be of discussion what went wrong for Haas this year. We're also going to look ahead to next year a bit and what we can kind of expect from Haas. And as Kaitey is a K-Mag super fan, we are obviously going to do, does K-Mag deserve a shot at a bigger seat in the F1 again? Obviously starting his career at McLaren, but wasn't really given much of a shot there. So to start things off, Kaitey, will get you in on this. Where did it all go wrong for Haas this year?
It would probably be quicker to say where did it go right, really, wouldn't it? But
yeah, true.
It was frustrating, I think, because winter testing in Australia, everything looked really promising speed wise, and everything else, in the fight out with the midfield, and then it's just all gone pear shaped from there, really, hasn't it?
So the one thing I would say is, would you have the opinion that Haas as a whole was mainly their performance side of things, or would you say that the main issue for them has been that the likes of McLaren and Renault have actually taken quite a big step forward in terms of their progression, and that's sort of left Haas in a bit of a no man's land?
I mean, yeah, you could say it's partly down to that, but I think the main reason is just down to the performance of their car, and it's just left them far behind, the rest of the midfield. So it's just been so frustrating because they haven't been able to properly figure out what's been causing all the issues in time for, getting it fixed for this season. So, the only hope is that they now have a better understanding of what went wrong and now have the time to, go into development and put it right, hopefully, for next year.
I think that is the real positive for Haas in terms of not having any rules and regulations changes, is at least they have a year's worth of data. But obviously the main reason for me is, for whatever reason, they couldn't figure out this year's Pirelli tyres. And with obviously being high degradation tyres over the past couple of years, getting the tyres in the right performance temperature has kind of been really difficult for teams. Obviously, Ferrari struggled with it, being the main one lobbying for the 2018 tyres to be brought back. Was it around about Silverstone, that type of year? It was around about that time of that season, wasn't it, where they were kind of bringing it up. But I also think Haas suffer because they're a small team. And obviously they buy in all their parts and they get their chassis built by Dallara. That if something goes wrong, they don't really have the manpower of like a Mercedes or a Ferrari to sort it out quickly.
Yeah, that's right.
Yeah, and it's kind of quite funny that for a lot of the year they were finding some combination of the Australia spec, weren't they? They kept on going back to it.
And one thing I'd say about it is, as you say, they buy in so many of their parts from different companies that it's almost as if they're trying to just pick the best parts of teams and try and bring it all together, which doesn't really work when you're trying to build a complete car. You need to be able to make tweaks quite easily, and as they're not actually designing the majority of the car themselves, it does make it difficult to actually, one, identify where the issues are coming from, but also to know what tweaks you can make that then won't affect a different part of the car. I know it's one of those where it's a weird concept that you can say, well, Ferrari have got the best engine, so if we put that into the chassis of a Red Bull with the aero package of a Mercedes, we're going to have the best car because we've taken the best parts of everything. But it doesn't work that way. And
it definitely hasn't worked that way.
Exactly, yeah. And I think that's something that Haas have tried to do, and they're now at a stage where they've actually got to try and sit down and identify the route they're wanting to go.
Yeah.
I think they're doing F1 on a budget model, aren't they? So I think it's really a lot of teams or prospective teams coming into Formula One are probably looking how Haas do. They're kind of the trailblazers, I would say, in this aspect, because they've gone Racing Point to an extent, did a little bit of working on a budget as a team, but Haas have gone, how can I compete on F1 in the cheapest possible way? And last year was pretty good with it. But yeah, this year it hasn't quite worked out as well. And that might be a lot of their parts are from Ferrari, that Ferrari didn't have as good as 2019 as it did 2018. So that might be a mirror reflection of what happened to Haas. What do you think on that, Katie?
Yeah, I mean, totally possible. I mean, obviously, this is, as Ash said, with you kind of having to get source parts from different places, it's always going to be, it's always going to be interesting trying to get them all, working together, and also makes it, I think, harder to kind of identify as well what's causing all the issues.
Yeah.
So yeah, quite potentially, if the parts that they're sourcing aren't as good as last year, that's obviously not going to help either.
I'd also say, driver-wise, I wouldn't say, if you look at their performances, that Roman Grosjean and Kevin Magnussen actually had better seasons. Like over the season, they both had some really good races. Like you can pick out Singapore for K-Mag, where he got the fastest lap, or
Australia first race of the season.
Exactly, Australia getting 6th place. So races on individual terms, they've had some really good performances, but across the season, I would say this has probably been one of Roman Grosjean's worst overall seasons, and I'd say that K-Mag hasn't been much better in terms of what we've seen from him previously, and admittedly that is partly down to the car. A lot of that is
down to the car, though.
Yeah, it is partly down to the car performance, but there have been times where one of the things I like about Kevin Magnussen is he likes to get the elbows out and is happy to have a battle, but I think because of where the car's been, we haven't seen that consistently. There's been times where it's almost just been, we'll let them go and fight another battle. And then that next battle hasn't come in a race. Yeah. So for the season, it's then ended up with the results not being where you would have expected driver-wise. But
it must be frustrating, I think, because, especially towards the second half of the season, where obviously they've kind of decided, to focus more on 2020 and just kind of put up with this year's car and its performance. And from a driver point of view, it must be really frustrating because, to qualify well and then just kind of, just continue to go backwards during the race. Like Spa, for example, where you just get people kind of overtaking you, car after car, and you just think it must be ridiculously frustrating from their point of view that, whatever they try and do, the car's letting them down.
A little bit more resigned on the radio to that one. I remember Grosjean, that Spa incident, was very vocal about how he was unimpressed with how they were going. But I think is the polite way of putting it.
Uh-huh.
But
Absolutely.
you are right. It would be frustrating, especially for a team last year that was best of the rest, and the drivers were consistently in the points last season. So to then go into the 2019 season, expectations would have been high. The team obviously would have been able to have that higher level of investment due to the prize money from the Constructors' Championship. And it just never... I don't think the season for them actually ever got going. So Australia was a good performance for them, getting best of the rest. But it was pretty much from then on what has happened to Haas. And as both of you have said so far, the main issue was the tyres. It was, I'm pretty sure it was Kevin Magnussen that said it in an interview midway through the season. It was less than half a degree in terms of temperature performance, and that was the difference between them being able to qualify into Q3, and then with the race, them just dropping back to no man's land really with it. So when you're that sensitive on temperatures, your car's not going to be able to perform, because obviously the weather's something that no team has got control of. So it was just trying to find that balance. They weren't the only team that had issue with the tyres though, were they? And they seemed to be the only one that never really got a balance with them.
And that's probably where it was going back to operating on a budget. And I think I did a video of halfway through the season, one of our first videos released of what's going wrong at Haas. And one of the main points I came from that was obviously the driver situation, where obviously they clashed first time in Spain, and then it was again at Silverstone. What were your thoughts on how Magnussen and Grosjean clashed early season, Katie?
It's a tough one, because obviously they're both kind of they're both keen to race, and they both want to do the best they can with the car that they've got, and there's nothing to stop them from racing each other. And whether the kind of frustrations played out a little bit in that, I don't know. But yeah, it wasn't ideal, was it, with them? Because they obviously qualified several times quite close to each other, and were starting next to each other on the grid and what have you. It just I think it just added to the negative side of the season, really, didn't it? With that, having to deal with drivers battling like that.
That was probably the angriest I saw Gunter in terms of in his time. He's always come across as quite a laid back, happy guy. Yes, he comes across angry. I mean, I think was it Sochi that K-Mag got that penalty?
It was.
Yeah, there we go. I knew you'd remember from that. He was obviously very vocal about his anger on that one, and
which was justified in that situation.
Did he receive a fine in the end? Am I correct in thinking that?
Gunter.
Sorry, say that again.
Did Gunter receive a fine for his comments in that race? I think he did.
I'm pretty sure.
Yes, I believe he did. Yep.
But Spain was probably the worst one for me, because it was a strong points finish, and it was actually the first time they'd put the upgrades on the car, wasn't it? And it was just after the safety car, and obviously they still finished within the points, but I think obviously Grosjean dropped back to 10th, didn't he? To 10th, and I think it was touch and go whether he would finish in the points, and that was unnecessary. Silverstone to me was a bit like one of those clashes where it was a bit innocuous to me. They just seemed to touch wheels, but somehow seemed to terminally damage cars.
A bit like Charles and Seb.
Yeah,
really.
That was the
that kind of
small. I was thinking of.
Yeah.
So it was odd there, but I suppose we can't really talk about Haas. Probably last bit on the drivers, actually, financially. For me, and this is a problem across the whole grid, but there isn't really any one way that you can get around it. in terms of when drivers are in the last year of their contract. I think it always puts more pressure on them, and they all make more mistakes. And when they have that security, you just see how well Carlos Sainz has done when he was given the 2-year deal. Bottas has performed a lot better since he was reconfirmed at Mercedes. As soon as Sergio Perez, also linked a little bit to the car improving, but as soon as Sergio Perez got that, I think 3 or 5 year deal,
5 year in the end,
5-year deal that he got with Racing Point, you know, it's no coincidence to me that drivers seem to perform better and are better on track when they've got that financial security. So do you think, obviously, Grosjean and all that drama around his contract being renewed or not didn't help the team?
Well, I'm sure it didn't help his kind of state of mind, that's for sure, and maybe kind of, you know, made him feel he had you know, more to prove in that respect. But I mean, I don't know, it's hard. I mean, you look at his kind of his, you know, DNFs this year, and you know, I know a couple of them were kind of collision wise and stuff, but there's a fair few that were kind of down to, like, you know, some issue with the car, brakes, you know, water pressure, what have you.
Yeah, the water
so
pressure one was
not
the
all
funny
his
one to me.
I think
so not all of his kind of, you know, issues were, you know, down to him, if you know what I mean.
Yeah.
Yeah, and with regards to his retirements, I actually think it worked out that I think it was about 2/3 of his retirements were actually from mechanical issues. So he is given and I know we've done it on the channel as well, we give him a hard time for mistakes he makes in terms of overtaking, but when you're in a car that's not got the reliability on your side of things, it doesn't really help with the confidence, does it?
Yeah, and
no, really not.
I know this is a controversial one because some people did think a Singapore incident was punishable. I was of the instant of it was a racing incident, agreed with the stewards on that one. Roman Grosjean hasn't been at fault or for any of the incidents this year that aren't just racing incidents. From there, he hasn't. No. Obviously, 2018 was his most recent high-profile, dangerous one. It was the Spanish Grand Prix, I believe.
Yeah, when he span and then lit up the rear tyres, didn't he?
Yeah, and just kind of placed his car on the middle of the track at the start.
Right on the apex.
Which wasn't ideal.
Of a blind corner.
But yeah, certainly this year, those retirements, a lot have been made of his fault in the past. And probably the last point before we look on ahead to the 2020 season for Haas is I don't know how we can't speak about them in terms of the Rich Energy debacle that obviously escalated after Austria, leading into the British Grand Prix, and then it was just complete carnage up until they officially announced they were parting ways pre-Singapore Grand Prix, I believe it was. So what was your whole thoughts on the Rich Energy situation, Katie?
I mean, it was just bizarre, wasn't it? I don't totally unprofessional, and just a random tweet out of nowhere sparked all this, massive debate afterwards, and obviously I don't think that's helped, in certain respects either, having that kind of hanging over their heads for some of the season, are they going to stay, are they going to go, and all that kind of stuff. But the whole situation was just really bizarre.
I'll be perfectly honest, I still don't know where it actually came from, because it was completely out of the blue, really. It wasn't...
Well, Kevin Magnussen finished behind George Russell at Austria, didn't he? And the tweet was in reference to, we did not come into F1 to be behind Williams. And something like that. And it was like going, their performances aren't good enough, we're pulling the plug.
Yeah.
And now, they weird stuff. They're now Lightning Volt as a company. They completely changed their name. And
well, they had to change their logo anyway. Because that was another complete distraction that you had. The whole copyright infringement that they were going through, because wasn't it a cycling brand?
It was something ridiculous.
Yeah, that they'd copied the logo of. But no, so yeah, the tweet that came out was completely out of the blue, because teams do have off weekends. It's not like you have teams that are consistently finishing the exact same places for all 21 rounds, 23 next season. 22 next season.
And that was still really early in the season as well. It was like the 9th race or something, wasn't it? So
yeah, and obviously it was the start of the Haas issues, but it I don't think anyone at that stage, I think it was more the drivers were an issue, and it was, well, the tyre problem had begun to kind of surface, hadn't it? And they weren't translating qualifying performance, because they were qualifying really well still at that stage, and going into race performances struggle. But I think it'd be interesting to get your take on this, Kaitey. I think for me, with Rich Energy being their title sponsor and Haas obviously being a budget team, I reckon their probably 2019 development was halted, because if you're operating on a budget and you're unsure what money you're going to get from your title sponsor, you can't really invest big money in anything, because you don't know if you're going to be able to pay that bills, are you?
No, that's a good point. And you kind of also wonder a little bit whether that was anything to do with their decision to go with the driver lineup for next year as well, to be honest. Because obviously Nico was going to be, a fair bit pricier than Roman, obviously. So how much did that kind of play into it? Was,
I think
budget.
It was certainly a factor that came into things.
Yeah.
I would say it was a factor there, but I probably think the main reason for sticking with Roman Grosjean was because the issues that they were having this season. We've seen it in terms of rule changes. Every team seems to get closer to each other with the consistency side of things. So because they had so many issues this season, I think really, whilst I know in driver predictions I said Nico Hülkenberg, mainly because I prefer Nico Hülkenberg to Roman Grosjean as a driver. I think my views on that have been quite clear. The fact that Grosjean's the one to get you a standout result, but not consistently get you one. But when you've had so many issues with the car, you need a driver who's experienced those issues to help you with the development to rectify them. You don't want to be going into a season where everything's gone wrong for you, and then you're getting a new driver come in who's having to learn the environment, but then also the car as well. So it would have been very difficult for them to have had the gains that they need for 2020 by having a new driver in the car. So I think that may have ended up being the actual overriding reason there.
Reason why.
But money definitely would have been considered, because imagine Mercedes not having Petronas, or Ferrari not having Mission Winnow. Both of those are major car manufacturers, but the majority of the money that's invested in their Formula One program is through their sponsors. So the only thing they've got in their favour there is their position in the Constructors' Championship will guarantee them to have significant income. So just imagine Red Bull, if Red Bull pulled out. It's quite major to have your main sponsor turn around and say, sorry, I've had enough.
Over something so
trivial
and weird as well. But I think we've probably covered quite well where it all went wrong for Haas this season. But there is a new season on the horizon, a long winter break to kind of work our way through. So we're looking ahead to the 2020 season, and obviously after 2018, Haas were very close to best of the rest. They have struggled in 2019. is, with the rule changes being the same, the horizon, the future more positive? And we'll go with you first, Katie. Do you think 2020 will be a successful or at least an improved season for Haas?
I'd like to think so. I'm optimistic at the minute, and I guess we'll see. With winter testing, etc., what develops and all the news stories that come out from that. But I think this year has been a big learning curve for them all. And I think that from all the things that have gone wrong this year, I think that's kind of a good motivational thing for the whole team to get it improved next year. So I mean, there's been some positives this year that we can kind of take forward to next year. There's the 1 lap pace that they've had in qualifying and stuff was at times really good. And I think I heard on the F1 Word video the other night that they actually were 4th fastest with their 1 lap pace in some of the qualifying sessions this year. Yeah, so that's definitely a positive thing. And yeah, so I'm optimistic. I mean, I know that the tyre tests that have gone on over the past few days haven't been particularly encouraging from what Roman said and stuff, but I'm trying not to dwell on that in a minute, and look at what can be done to improve it next year. And I think everybody's going to be in the right headspace. I mean, they've had a decent car before, so there's no reason to believe that they can't they can't do it again. It's not like it's been completely rubbish since they joined. So yeah, I'm keen to see where it goes direction wise next year.
Yeah, I think the 2020 tyres is an issue that's for everyone, and at least the positive that they have, if they stick with the 2019 tyres, is they've got a whole season of data that they can give to Dallara in terms of their chassis build and go, look, we need a chassis that is going to get a better performance out of the tyres than what you guys produced last year. And at least they can go, here, we've got this bucket load of data that we've had all season. How are we going to do this? And then obviously they can look at the parts that they buy as well, and they'll have a better understanding of what parts work for them, with obviously those no major rule changes coming into play. So the 2020 tyres would be less of an issue for me, but I think ideally they would hope for ones that would perform for them like the 2018 tyres. In terms of performance, I think they are heavily reliant on their research and who they buy from. And they are heavily reliant on the chassis that Dallara built. Because the only negative is from obviously going with Dallara, I think, do they have some base in F2? I think they have IndyCar as well. Not having a direct link into Formula 1 other than Haas makes things a little bit more difficult because they're not there. But you've got to hope. I think the main thing for them is probably getting a better chassis and getting a chassis that is easily worked around, because I think last year showed that they had a chassis that was very good and very quick at the start, but as teams developed, they couldn't really adapt anything onto it that gained any major performance. Well, in fact, every update pretty much sent them backwards rather than forwards. Yeah. Which was difficult.
I'd agree with Mike on that, because even if you go back to 2018, McLaren had no real performance in terms of engine or the reliability, but even Fernando Alonso was coming out and saying, we've got the best chassis on the grid, and it was having the chassis that meant that the developments they've had this season were actually able to result in them being best of the rest, because they had that base to work from. And we've seen it before with Haas. They have the pace. The issue is everything that's going on externally from races. So if they can work on the chassis side and be able to rectify the tyre issue, you're going to be able to see more consistency with that 1 lap pace. So this season, I would say the 2 best chassis have been actually I'll put 3 into the bracket. I'd say McLaren, the Racing Point, and the Mercedes. All 3 are very good on their tyres, and that has led to some amazing strategies. So we've got Hamilton in Mexico, we've had Sergio Perez in pretty much every race where he hasn't finished in the top 10.
Sergio Perez, second half of the season.
And then you have the likes of Carlos Sainz battling from the back of the grid in Brazil. When you have a chassis that allows you to attack the tyres without taking that performance away, it does allow you to be a lot more flexible with your strategies, which when you're in a car that isn't as fast, which is where the Racing Point is, it does allow you to get results that aren't necessarily expected but can allow you to make gains. The one thing I would say for 2020 that is the biggest issue for Haas is the McLaren step up this season no one saw coming in terms of its size. They're now on the coattails of the Red Bull and pushing now, I would say, with their aim going to be consistently challenging for top 5, maybe even trying to take that step up to consistently getting podiums. You've got the Renault, which whilst they had some reliability issues this season, on the whole, their performance was consistently in and around best of the rest. But you've then got the Racing Point, which at the end of the season took a real step up and was challenging for top 10s, even when you had Lance Stroll not really performing in qualifying. So Haas are going to make gains next season. We know that. They're not going to be stagnant. They're not going to end up with this performance level. The issue they're going to have is how much of a step up the teams around them can make, but also the teams that are already ahead of them. We've seen it with Ferrari this season. They were on performance levels with Red Bull. Second half of the season, Ferrari took a massive step forward in terms of their performance, and Red Bull weren't able to compete with them like anyone was expecting. So if a team like a McLaren or a Renault take that step again, in terms of their relative performance, Haas are going to have to take a double step to even be able to challenge them, let alone consistently beat them.
Well, that's nice.
That's the negative side of things.
That's nice and positively put for Kaitey by Ash there. Sorry, Kaitey, yes, as a Haas fan, you were hoping for a positive there. You're going to have to take 2 steps forward now because Renault and McLaren are going to leave you in their dirt. And who are Haas, really? Who are Haas?
I know what Ash means. I think 2021 is going to be the kind of big,
Yeah, that's where
big year, isn't it?
Is. I think that's where the look is for most teams now, especially the likes of Williams, Alpha, and unfortunately Haas, where they have almost been in
a tier 3.
It is almost having like another Formula 1.75 or whatever we want to call it this time. 2021 has to be where their big investment is. The issue they've got is they still need to have a performance next season, otherwise they are going to struggle to find sponsors.
Well, struggle to find sponsors and get constructors' money that they can then invest still in the development for the 2021 car. But I think we've given some positive outlook for 2020 and some less positive outlook for 2020. But one of the drivers is very close to your heart, Kaitey. And so if he has a positive performance relative with Haas this year, with the driver market obviously going to be a bit mental next year, with obviously F2 juniors being thrown in, the likes of Hulkenberg, Alonso being thrown in. Do you think Kevin Magnussen deserves a shot
The
at a bigger team?
The other thing to consider, about half the grid have contracts that run out at the end of next season.
Including Kevin Magnussen.
Very true.
So we're going to go into 2021 with big driver changes because none of the major teams are going to have the same driver lineups, if you think about where they're going to go. So
could Kevin Magnussen...
Silly season's going to be good next year, I think.
It's going to be a full season, not just a month.
Could Kevin Magnussen, Katie, fit into that higher up? And does he deserve that opportunity, in your humble opinion?
Well, you know my answer is going to be yes to that, but obviously I have, I have reasons behind that. It's not just yes, because he's my favourite driver.
And here is your pitch. If you were Kevin Magnussen's manager, you're moving into 2021 contract negotiations. This is why Kevin Magnussen, your driver, deserves a big seat. The floor is yours, Katie.
Okay. So, my arguments basically are, if you look at where he's come in to Formula One, his first year obviously was with McLaren, through a not great car compared to, where they've been in the past. And he only had a year there. He then went on as a test driver for a year, so, essentially had a year out. He then went to Renault only for a year, and the performance of that car wasn't great. So he's never really had the opportunity to show his skills properly in a consistently good performing car that's getting results. And Haas is obviously still a really new team, having been only their fourth season this year, so they're all still learning together and all the rest of it. So I just think from his, look at his starts that he has in quite a lot of the races this year, where he's just been flying up like 5-6 positions, and obviously the pace of the cars let him down, but he puts himself in that position where he makes up those positions and looks like if he was in a decent car he could put up a good fight against the other, certainly higher up the midfield teams. And just I know it's a controversial thing because he's an old school driver. He gets his elbows out. People don't necessarily like that kind of style of driving, but he actually came out with quite a good quote on that, which I will read you now if that's okay.
No, you go ahead.
It's only short, and it's he says, "I race hard. In a situation like this, with a midfield team, you're not guaranteed to score points, and sometimes you have nothing to lose." So my question is, if he was put into a team where, that isn't such the case, would his driving style change so that he's not quite so aggressive, because he doesn't necessarily have to be, because he's not in that same situation?
I think it's a fair point to make. It is that midfield, especially in the start season where they are all so close in development, it is a real scrap. And, those championship points for those guys, because obviously the top 6 places in a normal race are pretty much guaranteed to Red Bull, Mercedes and Ferrari. So therefore 4 out of 14, 4 out of the remaining 14 spots available with points, they're like gold dust. And so you would want your driver to kind of fight for those tooth and nail, surely.
Yeah, absolutely. I have no problem with his driving style at all, as you know. But yeah, it's just an interesting thing. Has his kind of style developed that way because of the fact that he's been in those battling, from the back of the grid potentially for a lot of the races, or towards the back. So I just think it would be really interesting to kind of see him in a completely different situation where he's kind of, starting in kind of the top couple of places and see how. Obviously he's still going to do his defensive driving. That's not going to change. But yeah, it's just an interesting question, isn't it? How would he be if he wasn't having to do that every week.
Yeah, on the defensive side, you still have the likes of Verstappen and Leclerc, notoriously hard defenders, as well on the grid, and they're within the top stuff. And you can say when he first came into the sport, it was first race actually ever, wasn't it, that he got his podium in 2015.
It was indeed, yeah, Australia. Yeah.
It was McLaren's last podium before Carlos Sainz in Brazil. I finally got that one racked into my head. But yes, and so from memory, I mean, it is going back a bit. I can't remember him being too aggressive in that McLaren year, which obviously was probably the most competitive car that he's been in, bar maybe the Haas last year.
Yeah.
The one thing I'd say about his driving style is he's considered aggressive, but I don't think he actually is. It's going to be a weird one here, because he puts his car in a position that makes it difficult for a driver to attack him. It's not like Verstappen when he first came into Formula 1, where there was a lot of moving under braking or forcing drivers off of the track like Grosjean's done on a number of occasions. I actually think Kevin Magnussen has got a very clever driver's brain, because I would say he's not forceful in his defence. And I'm one of those where if I was a team boss, I wouldn't have an issue with my driver having a couple of incidents across a season if they weren't, one, putting safety at risk, or also risking a retirement. So if you have a couple of banging of wheels or something like that, that's not an issue, because there's no safety aspect to it. Drivers touch wheels all the time. It's just you have unfortunate ones where retirements happen, and if they're more like Seb and Leclerc, that was an unfortunate one. But there are aggressive drivers on the grid. I wouldn't personally say that Kevin Magnussen is one of them. I think it is more, he's very clever and builds, especially when he's attacking, he takes a step back almost and will stay behind a car for a couple of laps and wait to see where that move is. It's not, I've caught up this car, I need to get past them now.
Yeah, that is more the Roman Grosjean style.
So
he is a little bit. Grosjean sees a gap and he does go for it, and sometimes he doesn't care if the car is in the way to do that. But Magnussen is. I would agree with that. I would agree he's a lot more tactical and clever on that front. Ideally, if he showed the pace, which, given the opportunity, he's talented enough to be on the grid. He would be ideal for. He probably wouldn't want to be, but at least for a starter, he would be an ideal number 2 for me. Because if you wanted a teammate who's going to defend your position while the Max Verstappen or the Lewis Hamilton or Sebastian Vettel runs out on top, or Charles Leclerc. There we go. That controversial. Well, actually, yeah, Leclerc's one of your more favoured ones. We'll use Leclerc. If they're running out in front, and you wanted someone who's going to have your back. I mean, Kevin Magnussen wouldn't be. He'd be probably one of the ones outside Kimi Räikkönen who you'd probably want on the grid to do that.
True.
This is going to be a weird question. How old is Kevin Magnussen now?
26.
27.
Is he 27?
I think now.
Ah.
So,
did he not turn 27 in October, I think?
He might have done, yeah, that. Yes.
Katie, if anyone's going to know, because that question was directed
He was born in 92, so he's 27 just.
Yeah. So
there you go.
He is still in a position age-wise where 18 could take a risk on him. I think one of the top 3 teams may be a step too far, only because I don't see him in a Mercedes or a Ferrari, and
I don't, to be fair.
It would be quite bizarre, really, for a Red Bull to go for a driver that's not in their driver program. because if they were going to do that, I think they would have taken the risk on Hülkenberg this season.
Well, I think with Mercedes and Ferrari as well, it was...
they have their own driver programs
they've
as well.
They've now promoting the juniors, and Ferrari especially have a lot of good juniors coming up through the ranks that they're going to be wanting in that seat.
You could go through Mercedes and Ferrari and probably list 3 or 4 drivers from their driver program that you could see taking that step up. So they're definitely, I would say, not options. Red Bull, in terms of their young driver program, they've always wanted to promote from within, and as I say, if they were going to take a risk on someone outside of that, Hülkenberg would have got the Red Bull seat this season. So really, the step up for K-Mag in terms of team would be going to a team that Haas want to be competing with. So does he actually need to take the step up in terms of the team, or does he need to have a team that's going to almost go to a top team mentality and go with your number 1 driver, here's a number 2 driver, go and show us what you can do?
Yeah, no, that's a good point actually. Yeah, I would.
Because
yeah.
He had his season at McLaren, but in all honesty, the car performance wasn't the greatest. And if you were going to look at that driver dynamic, Jensen was always going to be the one that would be favoured, especially as K-Mag was coming in rookie season. It wasn't in a position where he was going to be able to thrive. So you've seen it this season with, I'll probably say Carlos Sainz is probably the best example to use. Lando has pushed him, but Carlos Sainz has been the number 1 driver. You can't argue that. You can't argue that that's not the case, because consistently he was outperforming him on a Sunday, which is what makes that decision. You can outqualify your teammate as much as you want, but if you're not performing on a Sunday, the team's not going to favour you in terms of strategy or anything, because that's where your points are coming from. So would it be more beneficial for Kevin Magnussen to actually look at trying to build his career at Haas, with it being that the team is built around him because it works for other teams? Or is it that Haas are in a position where they need to have 2 drivers scrapping consistently?
I think if they can produce a car that's, good enough to, for him to prove his potential, then maybe that would be the ideal place to stay, because obviously he's got the stability there. He knows how everything works. He knows all the whole team. And so in an ideal world, it would be great if he could stay there and achieve what he wants to achieve with that team. But that's the question, isn't it? Are they capable of, having that top team mentality and giving him the car that he deserves to be able to show what he's got?
Well, I think the closer one for me, rather than comparing to Carlos Sainz at McLaren, I would say the perfect kind of comparison for K-Mag would be, can he do a Sergio Perez at Racing Point? Racing Point are a similar sort of team because they're an independent, although obviously the rumours of Lawrence Stroll potentially buying Aston Martin, that could massively catapult Racing Point forward. But, Sergio Perez has built that team around him. Can K-Mag have that sort of influence? Romain Grosjean doesn't have the age side on his side. I think he is 33 now on that aspect. So his long-term future is not with Haas. So it's, can Magnussen mould that team around him and have obviously younger drivers like a Lando Norris-esque talent, or at least a very solid midfield, maybe a Giovinazzi or a Gasly going together, or a Kvyat, who would certainly kind of see their futures, away from the necessary. Giovinazzi less so, but Gasly and Kvyat definitely would be looking at a midfield team to kind of do what Magnussen's doing, yeah, it'd be interesting on that aspect. So I think the answer to that, I would say Magnussen is an underrated driver on the grid, and we know you're always going to be positive towards it, Kaitey. But his best option is probably moulding Haas in his image and hoping, as with everything in Formula One, there is an element of luck in the way. There was an element of luck how Mercedes were able to dominate the hybrid era. We could easily have been talking about Sebastian Vettel or Fernando Alonso in that situation if they'd got the same sort of car or situation that Hamilton had been in. So with that element of luck, can he get there? Can Haas drive forward? And he might turn out to be in the right place at the right time with the right environment, because Gunter is very supportive of K-Mag, isn't he?
Yeah, they get on really well.
Yeah.
They get on really well. So, fingers crossed.
Yeah, and I think that was a good chat about Haas. I think we have probably covered it all, and I think that's probably quite a good point to round off. So thank you so much for coming on, Kaitey. It's been fantastic to chat to you about Haas, something you're passionate about and something you're very knowledgeable about as well, and I think it creates a good discussion and debate. I hope you've enjoyed coming on.
I have, thanks for having me.
It's been really good to actually talk to you rather than just reading comments.
Yeah, definitely.
Although we do appreciate all those.
We do appreciate them, so please carry on.
Do keep those up. But, it's been fantastic, and this is why we kind of started this F1 Worldwide podcast, is because we wanted to kind of interact more with fans of the sport and just kind of share our kind of passion and love with it. So if you are listening to this and you like a Kaitey and you're passionate and you want to come on, everyone is more than welcome to kind of get in contact, probably DM on Twitter or mention in the comments at least below that you have an interest, and we can go from there. But guys, if you've liked this video with Kaitey, don't forget to give it a thumbs up. Comment down below on where you thought Haas went wrong. What are their expectations for 2020? And what is the best situation for Kevin Magnussen going forwards? Probably the best way to pitch that one. And Ash, what else can we do?
You got to make sure to press that subscribe button so that our videos are going into your YouTube inbox. And if you press that bell icon, which no doubt Kaitey has, you will get a notification.
Absolutely.
You haven't, did you just say?
I have, absolutely, I said.
Okay. That scared me then.
Cool. The look of insult on Ashley's face right then. You recovered it well.
But yes, if you do press that bell icon, you will get a notification when one of our videos goes live. And as we are coming up to we're in the winter break now, but we have got our winter break content coming up, which we keep just teasing you with, putting little things out there, but we hope you will enjoy it, so you'll be able to see all of those as soon as they are on the YouTube.
But that rounds things off. Again, a big thank you to Kaitey. And for now, you F1 fans, keep racing.